Episode 18, The Bond of Light. In the days that followed, Evelyn's life transformed in unexpected ways. With Caleb by her side, the oppressive weight of the Hollow Man's presence felt a little lighter, as though some invisible barrier had been placed between her and the darkness. Caleb didn't know the full extent of what Evelyn was facing, but he sensed her struggle and didn't hesitate to offer his support. Their bond became her anchor, grounding her whenever the Hollow Man's whispers crept in. One evening, they decided to take a walk through the outskirts of the village. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in twilight. Shadows lengthened around them, but Caleb's steady presence kept her fears at bay. As they strolled in comfortable silence, Evelyn felt a warmth growing within her, a glimmer of hope she hadn't felt in months. Caleb pointed out the small details of their surroundings, a bird's nest high up in a tree, the vibrant colors of the wildflowers by the path, the faint rustling of creatures settling in for the night. He had a way of seeing the beauty in everything, a lightheartedness that helped her forget the darkness, even if just for a moment. "You seem a bit more like yourself," he said softly, glancing over at her. Evelyn smiled, though a trace of worry lingered in her gaze. "It's easier when I'm with you," she admitted. "The darkness doesn't feel so overwhelming." Caleb nodded, his hand brushing against hers as they walked. "You don't have to carry it alone, Evelyn. Whatever this is, I'm here for you. You can trust me." But before she could respond, a chill swept through the air, and the forest around them seemed to fall eerily silent. The warmth she had felt moments ago vanished, replaced by a suffocating sense of dread. A shadow flickered at the edge of her vision, and she instinctively took a step closer to Caleb, her heart racing. "He's here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Caleb's eyes narrowed, scanning the darkened path. "Who's here?" Evelyn's breath hitched as she felt the Hollow Man's presence, closing in, his malevolent energy pressing down on her like a heavyweight. Her grip tightened around Caleb's hand, and she forced herself to remain calm, to remember the light within her. "Evelyn," a voice hissed from the shadows, dripping with venom. "Did you think I would let you go so easily?" Caleb's eyes widened as he caught sight of the shadowy figure emerging from the trees. He couldn't see the Hollow Man's face, but the darkness emanating from him was undeniable, a sinister energy that seemed to seep into the ground around him, twisting the very air with its presence. "Stay behind me," Caleb whispered, positioning himself protectively in front of her. Evelyn's hand trembled as she placed it on Caleb's shoulder, pulling him back. "No, Caleb. He wants me alone. This is my fight." But Caleb shook his head, determination flashing in his eyes. "We face him together." The Hollow Man's laughter echoed through the trees, a cold, mocking sound that sent shivers down Evelyn's spine. "How touching. But do you think he can protect you, Evelyn? You are mine. You have always been mine." Evelyn closed her eyes, drawing on the warmth within her, the light that Miriam had told her to nurture. She could feel it flickering, weakened by her fear, but Caleb's hand in hers grounded her, giving her strength. "You're wrong," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I am not yours. I never was." The Hollow Man's form wavered, his dark shape shifting, as if her words had struck him. But he recovered quickly, his eyes narrowing with fury. "We'll see about that." Without warning, he surged forward, a dark blur that sent a shockwave of fear through Evelyn's mind. The ground around him seemed to wither, leaves turning black, the very air becoming thick and foul. But Evelyn stood her ground, focusing on the light within her, letting it grow, pushing back against his influence. The Hollow Man faltered, his form flickering as though he were struggling to maintain his shape. Evelyn's heart pounded as she realized the power of her light, strengthened by Caleb's presence, was driving him back. "You don't control me," she whispered, feeling the warmth radiate from her chest, surrounding her in a shield of light. "I am stronger than you." The Hollow Man snarled, his eyes blazing with anger. "Your light is nothing more than a spark, a feeble flame that I will extinguish." But Evelyn stood firm, focusing all her energy on the light within her. She let it expand, filling her with a radiant warmth that pushed against the darkness, driving the Hollow Man back. His form flickered, his shape growing more and more unstable with each passing moment. But just as she thought she might be able to push him away completely, he lunged at her, his form melding into the shadows around her. For a brief, terrifying moment, Evelyn felt the hollow man's presence seeping into her mind, his voice a cold whisper against her thoughts. "You will never be free of me," he hissed, his voice dripping with malice. "I am a part of you, Evelyn. And you will carry me with you until the end." Panic surged through her, and for a moment, the light within her wavered, flickering like a candle in the wind. She could feel him clawing at her mind, feeding on her fear, his influence seeping into the cracks of her defenses. But then Caleb's hand squeezed hers, grounding her, reminding her of the strength they shared. With a surge of determination, Evelyn pushed back, focusing all her energy on the light within her. She let it grow, filling her mind with warmth, driving out the hollow man's influence, pushing him back into the shadows. Slowly, she felt his presence fading, his voice growing weaker as the light within her grew stronger. And finally, with one last surge of effort, she expelled him from her mind, forcing him back into the darkness. The hollow man let out a furious scream, his form dissipating into the shadows, leaving only an eerie silence in his wake. Evelyn staggered, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the weight of the battle settled over her. Caleb wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "It's over, Evelyn," he whispered, his voice filled with relief. "You did it," but Evelyn shook her head, her gaze fixed on the darkness where the hollow man had disappeared. "It's not over," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "He'll be back. He's always waiting, lurking in the shadows." Caleb's grip tightened, and he looked at her with a determination she hadn't seen before. "Then we'll be ready. Whatever he throws at you, you're not facing it alone." Evelyn allowed herself a small smile, a glimmer of hope piercing through the fear that still lingered. Caleb's presence was her anchor, her shield against the hollow man's influence. She knew that as long as she had him by her side, she would have the strength to keep fighting. As they walked back to the village, the weight of the darkness felt a little lighter, the path ahead a little clearer. Evelyn knew that the hollow man was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his chance to strike. But she also knew that she wasn't alone. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, and with each step, she felt the light within her grow stronger, a beacon of hope against the darkness that would guide her through whatever trials were yet to come. End of episode 18.